Combo Enterprises is proud to present this multimedia broadcast extravaganza starring Jason Salas. My name is Chris. Joe, sir. Thank you, Joe. Sabrina Salas, Mantanani, en route. Is it en route or en route, Jay? Yeah, either way. Let's head into the K-Wave News Zoom room where we have united. We did it, guys. We united the Marianas. We have CNMI Attorney General Edward Manabusan and Guam AG Levin Camacho. Good morning, Attorneys General.
Good morning, Chris.
This is pretty cool. So there was a release out of the AG's office, the Guam AG's office, and basically with our lawsuit against the federal government, we've secured 25 other AGs to sign on. And this is a big suit that's before the Supreme Court. Again, it's centering around the Ordot Dump. And AG Levin, if you could just talk about being able to secure these other AGs, because I kind of see, and since you got in, I noticed that we jump on a lot of these class action suits that are being filed by other AGs, and so it'll be like Guam is part of this suit where 48 other states are also suing for whatever, whether it's the opioids or the Google one, and so is this kind of like what those relationships are about, where you kind of jump on theirs and then they jump on ours? Is that the kind of like your goal was in fostering that kind of like back and forth between your office and other AG's offices across the states?
Well, Chris, I'm going to really have to defer to AG Manabusan, because he's the one who, we filed our brief about a week ago, okay, and he was the one who actually led the amicus effort and was able to secure the 25 other AGs to sign on. So he actually, and his team, I know his chief deputy, Lillian Tenora, and Ali Nelson, I believe, is the assistant AG who led his effort on his side. But I'll really defer to AG Manabusan and thank him.
Thank you, AG Manabusan. Then I'm sorry, Dispensa, but so yeah, is that kind of like how it goes though with the AGs? It's like you jump on mine, I'll jump on yours.
Yeah. Buenas, Toto Guam, buenos dias para todos, Samsa. We first got a hint that there is a Supreme Court case that where Guam has been granted a writ, which is actually a milestone for the government of Guam through the Attorney General Levin Camacho. And so we looked at the writ, and because of the nature of the lawsuit and the issues that were involved, we thought that this is an opportunity for us to join Guam. And so we got on the ball and looked to attorneys around the country to assist us in preparing and filing the briefs on behalf of Guam. And so we did. And in such a short period of time, we got Hoosh Blackwell, who was taken on a pro bono basis for us. And through his effort and through the effort of the National Association of Attorneys General, we went around the country and really asked for Attorney General to provide or give us support. And Guam has a lot of friends all over the country, especially with this lawsuit. The issues are so similar around the country that it did take time for the Attorney General of 25 states to come on board. And so Guam has a lot of friends, and now he has a lot of friends of the court. And I think that this is such a great thing for Guam, where we're there to help Guam obtain the needed support with the cleanup efforts. I think this case really, if it stands, it would discourage cooperation and settlement with federal and state environmental regulators. I think that if it stands, it would allow the United States to evade liability for contamination that it is responsible for, leaving individual states and other residents with a disproportionate financial burden. And it undermines the principle of federalism, I think by threatening the override state law policy choices regarding how to address the environmental cleanup and the division of financial responsibility. So we hope that the United States Supreme Court, with all of the other states attorneys general, on behalf of Guam, will reverse the DC Circuit Court decision. And we are so happy to be part of this, especially with General Camacho. He has been so much help with us here and with this association with the NAC. Everyone is in support of Guam, so we're very glad to be part of this lawsuit.
Thank you very much, AG Manabusan, for that. I wanted to ask us. So, what are we asking for? Like, what's the remedy if we the Supreme when they hear it? If we win, what do we get?
Well, Chris, I guess just to echo what General Manabusan is saying, all of us, whether it's General Manabusan, myself, or any of the AGs, the first question we ask ourselves in these sign-on issues is whether or not this affects our community. How does this affect our island or our state or our district for the District of Columbia? And that's always a starting point. So in the NMI, they have issues with federal contamination potentially, and they wanted to ensure that if they clean it up, that there is they don't accidentally waive their ability to sue the federal government to contribute its fair share of cleaning up contamination and pollution. And this is not just a Marianas issue, and that's how AG Manabusan, I believe, was able to secure 25, bipartisan AGs to sign on, because this is an issue that affects states across the country. And with our partnerships with the NMI in particular, we say, okay, how does this affect Guam residents? But then we see a lot of similarities in our office and the NMI office. We are both struggling with the ice epidemic. We are both, HIDA is one initiative that I think AG Manabusan was very gracious to meet with me very early on in my tenure and to start talking about how can we get this ball rolling again and get it back before the ONDCP. So there are a lot of issues, but it always starts with how does this affect our community, and then where we can enhance our ability to serve our community. That's where we get into these partnerships.
Right. So is there a dollar amount attached? Just layman's terms.
We haven't even gotten. Well, at this point, 1 penny would be more than what the government has offered or has contributed. So
but the cost of the contamination would be about what, $160 million, right? General?
Yeah.
The $160 million is the total cost. I know that GSWA's manager was on record saying that right now we're paying $2 million per year in post-closure monitoring. Mm-hmm. So it's not a amount of money. I'm sure AG Manabusan and myself would take $2 million per year if we offset that. Right. But in terms of percentages, what they contributed, what is attributed to the government of Guam, we don't have a hard number. But we're just at the point where can we ask for them to contribute at all? And at this point, the District Court of Appeals has said, no, you guys, because you entered into a settlement agreement under one law, you cannot pursue under CERCLA. And I think that's where the danger identified by General Manabusan in his brief is that now, what does this mean for us if we're entering into these settlement agreements, not realizing we aren't going to be able to later sue parties who are responsible or who have contributed to the contamination.
Well, do you look at this lawsuit and how far you've been able to get it, and do you look at other issues, environmental issues between the territories in the Marianas and, like, let's say the military, with the military buildup? Is that apples and oranges, or do you kind of think it's an apples and apples kind of thing moving forward? Like if we see somewhere where, again, there's contamination or whatever, and there's a needed cleanup, like with the Agent Orange or any of the other contaminants that we find just far too much of here on the islands?
Well, and I know General Manabusan and our office, we're both involved in litigation involving PFAS, because they have PFAS. They sprayed their airfields up in the NMI. And so they have also secured counsel and are participating in the most multi-district litigation that's currently going on in South Carolina. So we do have a lot of similar issues, including buildup. I know in Guam we have the Marines, and the NMI they have the combined joint range that they're pursuing out there. I don't know in terms of what AG Manabusan's involvement is out there, but I will say that we're always going to support General Manabusan when there are issues that we have in common, and it's going to help strengthen the Marianas. And again, HIDA is a very good example of that, where we know what happens when Guam went on its own, and we didn't want to join with the NMI it was rejected. So we had to resubmit. We said, you know what, NMI, this is the best way we're going to do it. We're going to ask to become part of Hawaii. And we're able to get the ball rolling, and hopefully we have a favorable decision shortly.
Right. This is a kind of a pet issue of mine.
Any opportunity we get to work with the NMI.
Right. The HIDTA guys.
I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, just to kind of unpack it for our listeners. HIDTA is high intensity drug trafficking area, and Guam had been seeking that designation from the federal government because of the prevalence and really just the saturation of crystal methamphetamine. But we know the CNMI kind of has this similar problems, and so Guam had been putting in an application to the feds, and the feds said no. And so now what AG Levin was talking about was we're kind of jumping on with Hawaii and the NMI and doing it from, like, I guess, a more regional standpoint. But what it means is that if we get approved as a place where there's a high intensity drug trafficking, it comes with resources, right? AGs, resources from the federal government.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. I mean, we in this kind of environment where we're facing the drug issues, we need resources, and we have limited resources. Government of Guam, the CNMI, and so by joining Guam, Hawaii, we can build resources in terms of intelligence. We can build resources in terms of federal money to support undercover operations. There's a lot of different things that we need the resources. And so the HIDTA designation will certainly build upon those resources. And so it's important that we continue to pursue that. Otherwise, the fight against the drug epidemic is going to be our own fight. And we need to build resources. We need to build teams. We need to build, people around it, to eliminate the drugs and the abuses in our community. So HIDTA is one thing that strategically we're looking at in terms of getting our resources to support us in this effort.
There's a bunch of other things that you guys have worked on together, AG Levin, like you had mentioned, the PFAS, and I know that there was also the opioid lawsuit, and then I see here on the list tobacco settlements. Can we talk a little bit about, though, the National Consumer Protection Week? And this is something that, I don't know if we did this last year, but it's pretty cool. I'd like when Guam and the NMI work together, because despite like what I call our political separation, to me it just boggles my mind why we don't kind of just huddle up, and there's strength in numbers, right? And so I like to see this stuff where we work together. But let's talk about National Consumer Protection Week and it kind of its relevance now as we are in this pandemic, right? I mean, people talk about businesses overcharging, making money on things that maybe they shouldn't. So what is kind of the tone of the National Consumer Protection Week in this time that we're living in?
Well, I'll take, if you don't mind, General Manabusan, just a little bit about it. So you mentioned we have a lot of geographic. I mean, I can see Rhoda when I go up north. I'm from Jigo, but we have a lot of businesses that conduct business in both the NMI and in Guam. And one of the things that was entered into by my predecessor, Attorney General Barrett Anderson, was an MOU with the NMI office, basically that if there's a Guam company that sends or is deceptive and sends products to the NMI, and there's a consumer in the NMI and wants to file a complaint, we will work with the NMI office to pursue remedies against that business here, and vice versa. If we have someone who purchases something from the NMI, there's some deceptive act involved, or just a regular consumer complaint, we can work with General Manabusan and his team on those issues. But we wanted to put some awareness out as part of National Consumer Protection Week on what the laws are that are similar. I believe the first infographic that we put out was Know Your Rights. So we talked generally about, in the NMI, you get one more year longer. You get 4 years to file a complaint. As in Guam, we get 3 years. So they have a little bit beefier protections. And I need to pick General Manabusan's brain about the anonymous consumer tips that they receive, which I just learned about over the past week.
Yeah, Jason might want to avail of this, because I remember there's one time he ordered ice keki from Saipan, And when he got it, AG Manabusan, one of the ice keki busted open and it spilled everywhere. So,
but you know the apigigi was in pristine condition,
yeah,
so
the
I didn't
piggy was
complain.
fine. The piggy was good, but the ice keki low.
Yeah.
So how much can he get?
Yeah, so this is consumers kind of like General Camacho and I are, we're with how to protect the community and consumers, and so we worked on a lot of different things other than multi-step litigation. But we've shared information in the past, since this joined the office, and we have actually done investigations with his help, and we've secured, results. And so, instead of us going over to Guam and looking for this information, we just call Guam, and Guam, takes the lead and does the investigation for us and put the case together. So really, it's the perfect setup, and it's amazing cooperative efforts by the General and I in this effort. Yeah.
Let's talk about, because obviously you guys work very well together, and I can see that there's a good relationship here. But let's go back to the beginning. How did you guys meet?
It's a kismet. Busan came bearing gifts, brought the taro bread, I believe, from the Japanese restaurant / store.
Himawari.
I believe. Yeah, Himawari. And, I repaid the effort because I noticed that whenever the few conferences I've been able to attend with General Manabusan, he always asked for Tabasco. So I sent him some of the Nancy drizzle, just with the airline size. We can't go on any trips anymore.
Yeah.
But to go out and judge. He puts on a very great competition for high school kids, an oratorical competition called the AG's Cup. And the year that I went out, cannabis was the topic. And I believe the winner uses beautiful analogy of Icarus flying too close to the sun, and then talked about, gambling, cannabis, whether or not this would be kind of hubris and the hubris of the prior generation. So just recognizing the importance, Chris, of working with our neighbors in the NMI. And I have a lot of friends who are out there, and we always would joke about it, but it's great to see in a professional setting that we produce results. I mean, these relationships and these bonds that we form with General Manabusan, General Connors in Hawaii, AGs across the country, I mean, it really results in tangible benefits for our respective communities. And yes, that's a great friendship, but at the end of the day, we need to be able to say, well, this is what we've been able to produce. Right. And we've been able to produce quite a lot with the NMI and working with them. And again, I'm extremely grateful to General Manabusan, the first elected AG in the NMI. And he's going on a second term, the elder statesman for me, and really helping teach me the ropes and introducing me to a lot of the folks at the associations.
I wanted to ask about maybe some of the challenges that face both your offices, and maybe kind of start with recruitment. Are there other challenges that you guys have in recruiting, like prosecutors and other types of attorneys that are needed?
Yeah, that's a very big issue for us. I mean, and that's where we share our common interests and common difficulties out here. Really, the pay scale is a challenge. We have to offer a job for an experienced prosecutor. We have to, compete with other employers. And it's very hard. It takes us months to get a prosecutor out here or to hire someone for our civil division. And then once they get here, if they don't take the bar, they only have like 4 years to work for without taking the bar. And so we are constantly turning attorneys around. So that's one of the challenges. The other challenge in general that I think we're still working on is having a medical examiner. You remember, you and I have discussed this many times, how we much need this service, and you have been a lead in trying to get one for Guam, and we told you that we would like to share the cost of that. And that's still our offers, because we really need a forensic medical examiner out here too.
Right. So AGs, it's not necessarily like the cost, right, of getting a medical examiner, because now that there's this offer on the table where we could possibly split the cost with NMI, is it just a matter of availability? Like, because a lot of people can't wrap our mind around, like, are you serious? We can't find anybody who wants to come live in a tropical paradise and be our medical examiner.
Yeah. Well, pay is one issue, Chris, but there's just a shortage across the country. And I was actually very excited to learn that our national association, because there is a shortage, and this started out of Puerto Rico. They didn't have enough forensic pathologists in Puerto Rico. And then you see states across the country, they're having to drive bodies across state lines to have a forensic autopsy performed. So we are not the only ones struggling to recruit a forensic pathologist, but our national association has actually just received a pretty large grant to develop forensic pathology programs out of, I want to say, Montana, because this is such an issue. And the idea is to train up and to recruit and to build that out, in particular for rural communities and islands. I don't know if we would consider ourselves rural, but we definitely feel the effects of being kind of outside of the big cities. Right. So we're hoping that new grant opportunity will provide us some more interested candidates to get out here. The Hawaii pathologists that have been coming out, I believe General Manabusan has also been able, we've put him in touch with them, and I believe Dr. Lang or Dr. Ishikawa has at some point over the last year gone out to the NMI, but it's not ideal. It has been able to work for now, but obviously we're both very interested in securing a long-term solution for the chief medical examiner position.
I guess I would just want to ask is in having to like share the pathologists and the doctors who come over and do like the forensic type stuff, is justice compromised at all?
Chris, based on what I've seen, it's typically, I think the longest would be 2 to 3 weeks. It's been a little bit trickier with COVID because of the restrictions of movement and the quarantine protocol, both coming into and leaving. And I'm sure General Manabusan would have the same thing. They're wanting to keep their scores down and not have any community spread. But I would say that we have not had any criminal investigations compromised as a result. And in fact, I believe the pathologists that we bring out are pretty good. I wasn't here for the prior chief medical examiner, but I know that we have started looking at modernizing our facilities here and just updating some of the practices to more contemporary standards. So we're seeing a change, and we're hoping that whoever we do end up hiring will agree to that and will kind of push us into the 21st century for practices.
AG Manabusan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, right now we are in the same situation with Guam. Is once in a while we solicit the assistance of forensic examiners from Hawaii, and they have come up here to help us, but it's very costly, and we'd rather see someone on island. The efficiency of having this thing done, when someone dies, and how families are, they really wanted their sons or daughters or whatever, mom and dad, released right away. And so that's an issue. So we want to, try to assist in that regard. Is really the speedy resolution some of these examinations, so that families can move on and have a peaceful, burial or whatever. And so that's one of it. It's really just trying to close this gap.
What about any shared difficulties or challenges when it comes to like fighting corruption in our local governments, or any types of misuse, abuse, that type of stuff?
Yeah, well, it's just resources. Just resources. I think having adequate resources is important. But other than that, it's just part of the work that we do. Those challenges are being worked on a daily basis.
What does it take, AGs, like with like government corruption? Are those like types of attorneys that you look for? Do they specialize in like white collar types of issues, or and do we have those types of lawyers on staff, or is that something that we try and get, or it's just hard enough getting prosecutors?
I would say, I mean, a lot of times theft is theft. And whether you're a business stealing from customers or if you're a government employee stealing from the people of Guam, there's nothing unique about the investigation and prosecution of those cases. I would say it gets trickier because it hits very, people want to believe that their government is doing what's best for them. They're not out there being corrupt. So when there is an allegation of, maybe someone didn't follow the rules, and when I make this comment, just because something is illegal doesn't make it a crime. I think it's very hard for the average person to conceptualize, well, if it's illegal, therefore it's a crime. And I'm not sure if General Manabusan feels this too, but we have cases where we find things, maybe administratively it's going to get handled, maybe on the civil side, but it doesn't rise to a criminal corruption case. And the public, of course, is not satisfied with that avenue. So, I think that's part of our jobs is to just educate that, yes, we have criminal conduct has its own set of rules, what constitutes a crime, but in terms of there being specialized knowledge, I'd say absolutely not. Wow. We have a forensic auditor that helps go through and they do business stuff. She helps with our consumer protection cases as well. So, the more prosecutors, obviously, it just helps from a workload perspective because those can be very paper intensive or evidence intensive. Investigators would be the same thing because sometimes you get a thread and you have to now work it up to figure out what's actually going on in this case. And you kind of follow it up and you may not know when you start where it's going to take you and it turns into a much larger enterprise. From a resource side, I would say there's nothing unique that is required to prosecute most of the cases that we see at this point.
Yeah, and I agree with General Camacho. Sometimes what looks like looks like a crime is really not a crime, but it doesn't look right, and so people out there look like, hey, what are you doing about it? And well, it doesn't look right, but it is not a crime, and so that's kind of like one of the issues that we have to educate the people about.
People want blood all the time. I know what you're saying.
What's that?
The people want blood all of the time. Yeah. I wanted to kind of ask, and we can kind of we'll go to a close after that. But with like plea bargains, right? And I know this is a trend that it's nationwide. But how do you kind of balance like getting a plea, and closing it off as a win versus the public's desire to see, trials and I guess fuller justice? I mean, and is it a case by case thing where you kind of go like, oh, we can plea this one out and shut the door on it? So how do you kind of like achieve that balance where the public perception is satisfied?
Plea bargaining is a great tool for prosecution, and we have a whole lot of discretion whether or not to charge a particular crime or whether or not to move forward for a trial. And really, when we talk about plea bargaining, we have to look at the entire criminal justice system. And we got to sometimes, like I said, with resources, we don't have enough resources to try every single case that comes before us. And there are certain crimes that really rehabilitation will work. Certain crimes that once you pay restitution, that will work. There are definitely crimes where you really have to punish and deter people from doing it again, from doing the particular offense. So it's a great bargaining tool, and I think we're very much aware of type of cases where we need to plea bargain, and that's another difficulty where we have to explain our decisions to the public. But it's a great tool, and we need to have that and continue to exercise that discretion in the plea bargaining situations.
Yeah, AG Manabusan, I appreciate what you said there about having to explain things to the public, because a lot of times outside looking in, like we're not lawyers, right? When you see one plea versus like another plea, a lot of times to the people, it seems like there's no rhyme or reason. And that's when people, when you have a void, people just fill it with their own information and they come to their own conclusions and they start talking, right? So I guess AG Camacho, if you want to kind of expand on what AG Manabusan had said from your own perspective.
Sure. One thing that is really key, present the people of Guam, but victim input and victim involvement in a case, especially including any type of plea offers is essential. And one thing that I notice is that the community will say, oh, why was this plea offered? And, they're not the ones, our prosecutors, I will give them kudos. They've been in trial pretty much nonstop from the beginning of this year because of the backlog of COVID. They're the ones who have to meet with these victims, sometimes very young victims, sometimes women who don't want to have to relive the trauma at trial. And it can be upsetting to see people like, well, why did you offer a plea when you're meeting with the family, when they say, I don't want to have to go through that again on the stand. I don't want to have to be cross-examined by a defense attorney about my personal life and what I was doing that night and why I was doing this or why I was doing that, why I was dressed this way or why I was dressed like that. So, that is one piece that we don't really publicize because of our respect for the privacy of victims. But I will assure you, and Chris, we were on a few months ago and you were kind of giving me grief about a victim who was unhappy with the case. And then she told you and Sabrina, no, I talked to them about a plea offer and they didn't take it. So we're going to go to trial. So that happens more often than not, and cases that go to trial, we're not able to work out a resolution that's fair. But just be mindful that we are engaged with victims. We do get their input, and we want their support in this. And sometimes it really is just as simple as they don't want to be re-traumatized through the process of trial. It's not fun. I mean, unless you've been cross-examined in trial, you don't understand how stressful it is to lead up to it and to get into a courtroom in front of absolute strangers to talk about the worst possible thing that could have happened to you. And that's something that, the kind of backyard, the second chair, the armchair attorneys will talk about, but it's kudos again to our prosecutors and our advocates for having to deal with that.
All right. Do you guys want to close it out here? I think this is, what is that old saying? This is the beginning of a beautiful relationship.
Casablanca, right?
Yeah, there you go. Right. Yeah. Go ahead, AG Manabusan.
Just want to thank you and your station and General Camacho for this joining your program. We do a lot of things in the background, General Camacho and I, and this is one occasion where we say something about what we do, but certainly this is such a our association, my association with the General has been very, very good, and we tend to work together moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, AG Manabusan. Also, Auntie Maria Gutierrez in our Facebook comments here writes, Hoffaday to my favorite former boss, presiding judge Edward Manabusan at the CNMI court.
I said Mary, yes, Mary.
I don't know if you ever tried her mochi cupcakes, but number one. Maybe you could get that in the next Goodwill.
I'm going to make sure that I go look for her.
Right, there you go. AG Camacho, closing?
I don't have anything to add to what AG Manabusan he's kind of said it all. But I'm going to ask Jason to write me a tardy note. My son's waiting for me to take him to school.
Okay. We'll see you guys. Thank you, AGs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Joss. There you go. That was good. Good talk.